Hi, guys, and welcome to Guesstimate number 4 of this series where we solve guesstimates and market sizing questions asked in interviews. So, without any delay, let's look at today's question. Estimate the weight of an airplane. This question is one of the most important questions asked in interviews because it requires people to be very creative with answering them, but also be able to narrow down the question as much as possible. So, before starting with the calculations, we will ask a few clarifying questions that will help us to do just that. Firstly, what type of an airplane are we considering for this question? Are there any passengers or cargo whose weight we should count? What are the things whose weight we can consider negligible as compared to the weight of other bigger parts? So for the first one, we are considering a mid-sized plane, something like a Boeing 747. For the second one, we will not be having any passengers or cargo on the plane. And lastly, we can ignore the weight of the seats and the engine as they will be negligible compared to the weights of the plane body. Now we will construct our framework where we will divide the plane into roughly 3 parts and then calculate the total volume of each part. First, we will consider the main body as a hollow cylinder, then we will consider its wings as a rectangle, and then all the other comparatively small parts like its tail, landing gear and cabin fixtures, we will consider them together. Then we will add up all of the volumes of the parts and then multiply it with the density of aluminium, which is the main material with which the plane is made and which will contribute the most to the weight of the plane. Now that we have our framework, let's start with the calculations. For the main body, we will consider it to be a cylinder of length, which is also its height, as 40 meters and diameter of 4 meters, which is practical for a plane that has 6 seats in a row. So the radius we get is 2 meters. Now we calculate the volume of cylinder using the formula pi r square h, and we get the volume to be around 502 meters per cube. But remember that the body is hollow, that is, it's not a solid cylinder, so consider its thickness to be only about 0.01 and we multiply it with 502 and we get the actual volume to be 5.02 meter cube. Now for the wings, we consider them in a shape of a rough rectangle. I know you might be thinking it's a trapezium, but remember you have to make your calculations as easy as possible to quickly solve in front of an interviewer. Thus, we take it as a rectangle with its length as 35 meters for both the wings and the width of 4 meters and its height as 0.3 meters. Now we calculate the volume using the formula length into width into height and we get around 42 meters per cube. But the wings are also hollow, and considering them to be only 0.01 meters thick, we get the actual volume as 0.42 meters per cube. Finally, we add up the volumes of the smaller components. So for the tail, we consider it to be half of the wing's volume, so about 0.2 meter per cube. We take the landing gear to be about 0.4 meters per cube and the cabin fixtures to be about 1 meter per cube. So if we add all 3 major parts of the plane, the total volume we get is about 7.04 meters per cube, which we will round off to make the calculations easier. Now we will assume the density of aluminium to be about 2700 kgs per meter cube. And if you don't know the density, don't shy away from asking the interviewer. They will give you an answer. So the formula to calculate total mass is volume into density. Thus, 2700 into 7 gives us 19,000 kgs, which is equal to 19 tons. That is your answer. A mid-size Boeing plane without any passengers and cargo will weigh around 19 tons, give or take. Now, some other solutions that I found on the internet were quite creative but not very reasonable for a consulting interview, and I'll tell you why. One of the solutions I saw was that we take the plane and put it in a big vessel with water filled to the brim. So when we put the plane in, the weight of the water that the plane displaces will be the corresponding weight of the plane. See, this is a very creative approach, and honestly speaking, I also might not have thought of it. But I remember that one of the interviewers in his feedback had told me to always be practical in approaching problems. What that means is, if you were on the job and your boss told you to roughly estimate the weight of the plane, now would you ask him to get you a big vessel of water and then put the plane in it and then weigh the water that falls out? No, right? Because it seems impractical. That's what it means. Always approach a guesstimate as if you were solving it on your job with the least amount of resources at your disposal. Be creative while being practical. That's it for this guesstimate. I hope you understood this approach, and if you have any suggestions on what guesstimates I should solve next, write it down in the comment section below. Until then, thanks for watching.